Let's see what he's got to say. Studio Director's Letter 2025 and beyond. Cinemax Online Studios Studio Director Matt Fyror talks about another big year for the Elder Scrolls Online and some of the even bigger changes coming to the game in 2025 and beyond. As the year's drawing to a close, I'm going to take some time to walk you through my thoughts on 2024 and look ahead to 2025 and how ESO will be evolving to meet the changing needs of the community. Yeah, I mean, already, this is something that I've talked about a lot with them. MexDev with the 7 months, thank you very much. In the past, it's often felt like they really stick to certain ideas and philosophies and feedback for long periods of time and kind of like hold true to those things, and haven't really accounted for the fact that people's wants and needs drastically change over time. It's not that people don't know what they want. They want what they want when they want it. And as time goes on, that changes. And so as a game studio, you have to keep up. If you have a live service game, you have to keep up with what's going on there and what people are wanting. So this first line, I think, is very in touch. CNEX, hello. Thank you very much. Appreciate the 44 months. First, a few notes about 2024. I probably say this every year, but 2024's ESO content was among my favorite. Love the vibe and story of Gold Road, and now that Home Tours is allowing me to see so many other people's homes, I'm seriously considering making Maryvine Estate my main house, although it will take a lot to unseat me from Mornoth Keep. 2024 showed that we are still creating wonderful content for all of our players. We ended the year with 2 new companions. Some fun tweaks to Battlegrounds. Blah, blah, blah. Sorry. I'm interested in 2025, to be honest. We already know what happened in 2024. Amsterdam event was amazing. I was able to go to that. Sadly, they did cancel the NA event for 2025. Didn't really give much info on that. But yeah, the Amsterdam one was awesome. All right, looks like we're moving forward now to 2025, so let's see what he's got to say. All right. Now it's time to look forward, which will comprise most of this end-of-year message. Change is a constant, especially in gaming. The gaming industry changes, player habits change, other games come and go. In fact, change has been constant since ESO launched in 2014. We have been able to keep up with the times, make hard decisions and big changes when it was time to make them. Looking back on all the changes that have gotten us here, it's pretty clear that we have generally made the right decisions at the right times for our game. And now we're looking forward to 2025 and how we can change ESO to keep it relevant, awesome, and compelling. Okay. So obviously they have made a lot of good decisions, because we wouldn't all be sitting here talking about it and we wouldn't be playing ESO. But to say generally made the right decisions at the right times, I think is given a little bit more credit than the reality of it. There have been a lot of patches with a lot of backlash, so I don't know if that's super accurate. Nalandia with the tier 3. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, thank you.
Who's a bold capybara?
ZJ with the 15 months. Thank you very much. Historical revisionism. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm not trying to like crap on them or anything. Like, they've obviously made a lot of good decisions with the game, but they've made, just to be blunt, they've made a lot of bad decisions with the game too. And I think that's part of the collective frustration around ESO, is the player base seeing a lot of the potential of where the game's trajectory could have gone, and what could have been done and what was done instead. So yeah, I don't really agree with that line there, to be completely honest. But yeah, we'll see how they can change ESO to keep it relevant, awesome, and compelling. Since 2017, we have released amazing content and systems every year, but always on the same schedule. This annual cadence pushed the team to focus on short deadlines every June, where all types of content, systems, contents, zones, etc. had to be completed at the same time, and has not left us much time for experimentation or thinking about doing things differently. Yeah, that's been a big point of feedback that's been given. Nina with the 40 months, thank you very much. Thank you. Hope you're doing all right. Biz said, it is pretty clear is the kicker, makes it seem like anyone that disagrees doesn't have a leg to stand on. Yeah, I think that is, I'd agree with you there, saying it's pretty clear that we have generally made the right decisions. I don't think it's pretty clear. You know, you can say the game is successful after 10 years, and that's true. But you don't know like how much more successful it could have been if other decisions were made, right? So I don't think it's pretty clear, right? Yeah. Anyways, so I think it's good. They're revisiting the annual cadence. At the end of last year, we gave a slight heads up that we would be shaking things up. Our lead times are so long that we were already planning for some of these changes back then. And I'm very happy to say, starting in 2025, you'll see new ideas and ways of launching content start rolling out. Hey Shades, hey Nobu. Hey Zelius. Oh snap. Plain and Pretty with the 5 gift bomb. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. It's pretty clear that the game would have been more popular if they hadn't done update 35. Yeah, exactly. Hey Elwood. Hey Jamorov. Hey Gertruzi. Hey Sandra. Thank you again, Plain and Pretty. Appreciate that. Okay. Solo, we'll see if they're cooking something. We're just getting into the letter. Yeah, we're just getting into it. All right, next section here. Turning the page on chapters. All right, let's see what you did there. We have been incredibly successful with our strong annual chapter releases, starting with Morrowind in 2017, up through Gold Road just 6 months ago. Zone design and quest content is at the core of every Elder Scrolls game, as our annual chapter release model highlighted. We will still do lots of story content, but now, looking into 2025, we need to concentrate on different types of content to support all types of ESO players. So we are putting chapter aside, and we'll be focusing on new types of content and a new release philosophy. More info on that below. As 2025 will be a transition year for new content, we're going to have new zone-based content launch in 2025, but you'll have to wait until April to hear the specifics about how it's different. Stay tuned. So this is different here. Normally they do the global reveal in January, and it looks like we're not getting it till April this year. All right. Introducing seasons. Over the course of 2025, we will be moving more towards a seasonal content model and away from launching massive content updates once a year, as we did with chapters. We will be talking much more about this in the future, but in 2025, expect to see named seasons of 3 or 6 months duration with a mix of themed story content, events, store items, dungeons, and more. 2025 will be a mix of old and new as we move the dev team towards creating smaller, bite-sized pieces of content. We will still have some larger items that we've been working on for over a year, which you'll see launch as well. Freeing up the dev team from needing to adhere to a strict annual cycle means we will be able to have teams launch content when it is ready throughout the year and not work to a date in June. This will let us focus on a greater variety of content spread over the year. This supports the new seasons model and will enable us to release content, updates, fixes, and systems in a more efficient manner. Yeah, I mean, I think this is fine. I think the big kicker is, will we still get roughly the same amount of new things added? Is this just a is this a new way for them to do it, or is this a way for them to scale back how much they're adding by kind of like repackaging it as something different? And only time will really tell on that one. You know, like if there's no chapter and there's no like big new zone. I mean, they said there's going to be a new zone. Will that still include a new trial every time? Will that still be like once a year that we get a new trial? Will we still get dungeons once a year? There's a lot of unanswered questions here. All right. Let's see what comes up next. A new focus on change and experimentation. We have been hearing from you, the community, that we need to experiment more to shake things up and not be so predictable. That is 100%. Yeah. The game needs new and different types of content and for long-standing feedback to be addressed. We've already started on some ideas that will be tested in 2025. These systems and ideas will be clearly marked as experiments in patch notes and are ideas that may or may not be fleshed out into full game systems. With our new focus on breaking up content into seasons and away from years, it gives us time to do these experiments and changes. I mean, that's the good thing about a season, right? You can bring in a mechanic. I mean, you see this in Diablo and Path of Exile, other types of games that do seasons. You can bring in a new mechanic with the season. If people aren't really that big on it, when the season's over, the mechanic can go away, and that's that. But if you bring in a new mechanic with a season and everyone's like, "Oh, this is awesome. We love this. Please don't drop this when the season's over," then it can be integrated into the actual base game. And I think that's a really good way of doing stuff like that, because, you know, sometimes you will swing and miss. But it's not that big a deal if it's just like, okay, this is a 3-month period where this new system we're trying out didn't work out. I think that works a lot better. All right, so here are some of the ideas that they're working on, some of which you may see on live servers as tests in 2025 and beyond. Some of these will be tests and some will be improvements based on player feedback. Waits says, how about bringing in a rework to 95% of the game sets that are never used? Yeah, I was really a big proponent of that, and actually spent several months of my life, like hundreds of hours working on that very thing and trying to push for that. So I completely agree with you, Waits. I think that would be huge. All right, so we need to seriously address Cyrodiil performance. Our ambitious goal is to return it to the concurrency levels we supported in 2014. We'll be experimenting with a Cyrodiil campaign where all classes will have PvP-specific and more performance skills that replace the standard player skills, with the expectation that we can support more players per campaign. I think this is an interesting test to run. I'm glad they're keeping it in a campaign. So for people that don't want to participate in this kind of playtest, they don't have to participate in it, you know. But if they can cook up like some really good, more performant alternatives to like morphs of skills, I don't know exactly what they mean by they'll have PvP specific skills. If that means when you go into the Cyrodiil campaign, your skills actually change and are slightly different versions in Cyrodiil that perform better. I think that's what they mean there. Or if you'll have like a limited, shorter selection of skills to pick from. It's not really clear. But I think that's a cool test to run. And, you know, if that works, and if you can go out in Cyrodiil and have just these giant group fights and not have 2000 ping, you know, it could be a cool way to handle that. It could also feel really restrictive and kind of go against the whole idea of this as an MMO, of you building your character and making choices around your build if you're like limited to very specific skills. So we'll just have to see more info on that and how they're doing that. Hey, St. Crow. But I think it's a cool experiment to run. The part up here about seriously address Cyrodiil performance. So I've been religiously following ESO news since 2016. And he has said this in, I think, every end of year letter since then. So I appreciate that it's brought up, but I put no faith at all at this point in this. I do think it's cool that they're thinking outside the box with stuff here, but this has been said for 8+ years now, and it's still where it is, right? So I'll believe it when I see it, is how I feel about Cyrodiil performance. And that's, I'm not trying to be rude to them or anything like that. It's just, I'm just basing that in facts, right? Like we've seen this in letter after letter, in forum post after forum post from the devs. We've seen this 30, 40 times in official posts at this point, and it is where it is still. So it's it's a good sentiment, but yeah. Let's move on to the next line here. Increasing the difficulty of standard overworld combat. That's what I'm talking about. This is one that I've wanted for so long. So my last zone that I've quested in was Northern Elsewhere. So Southern Elsewhere and on, I have not done. I did a little bit of Necrom when that came out, like streaming it on release. But I just get so bored in Overland content that I couldn't keep doing all the quests. I couldn't keep doing it because I was just so bored. And it was like watching a movie with just extra tedious steps, pretty much is how it felt to me. I wish they gave some more info on this, though. That's pretty vague. Introducing or increasing the difficulty of standard overworld combat. Like, is this going to be an optional thing? Is this going to be something that is felt by the player, but you're still in the same zone as other players who are not experiencing the difficulty increase? Kind of like, so Diablo 4 has has level scaling where you could be level 20, you could be next to somebody else in the world that's level 50. You're fighting the same enemy. You're seeing that enemy as level 20. They're seeing that enemy as level 50. And really what's happening is it's all percent based. And so it all just kind of like, it's all smoke and mirrors, essentially. And so I wonder if they could do something with Overland difficulty like that, where you could ramp up the difficulty for yourself, but be playing alongside of people that maybe don't want that increase. Or if they just completely separate it and say, hey, I can choose, I want to play on Veteran Overland or whatever. And then it's just a completely separate instance. If they go that route with Veteran Overland, I really hope they give players that option from the beginning. Like as soon as a new player makes their first character. Because I think for a lot of gamers out there, like really long-time gamers, new players coming to ESO, even as a brand new player, the Overland can feel really easy. I've heard that from a lot of people. So being able to pick that right from the beginning and say, I want to start out in Veteran Overland and like have that, maybe it's not as efficient, but for some people, that's not really what matters. They want like a more challenging playthrough going through the story of a game. I think Path of Exile 2 just came out and kind of gives people that, like, there's no option in that. You're just stuck with the harder difficulty there. But like there are a lot of players out there that would really like a challenge in going through the actual meat and potatoes of the game. Like the way it is now is the biggest chunk of the game, like 80-90% of the game is not engaged with by a lot of people. So like for me, the Overland is just boring, just to be blunt. It's boring. I don't do it. And so the trials, the dungeons, certain group activities, PvP, like IA, stuff like that, you're kind of relegated to that area if you want any kind of challenging gameplay. So opening that world up to the whole game. Now, I will say I do think this needs to be optional. because I think a lot of people don't want that challenge, and they don't want Overland to be any more difficult than it is. They just want to go through and be able to mash their hands on their keyboard or controller and not worry about dying. And that is fine. Like, that is not an invalid way to want to play a game. But neither is wanting to actually have a challenge and engaging playthrough with the story content of the game. Like, I think both sides are fine. So to have that option would just be the best of both worlds there. Like Path of Exile 2, I've been having a blast. I've died so many times. But then you beat a boss and it just feels so good, and the story bosses actually last a while you're fighting them. And there's just this really good feeling when you're done, and it feels like a real threat, like a real boss. Whereas in ESO, you fight a boss that's supposed to be this big world threat, and you kill them in like 8 seconds, and it's just like, I can't trick myself into feeling like this matches up. It just doesn't work. And they try to put in like health gates and stuff and force you to do mechanics to get around that a little bit, but it still doesn't really work. There's no real threat there. So this is what I've been hoping for the game for a really long time, you know, and maybe a little selfishly, because I have from 2019 on in questing to still do that I haven't done yet, and to have that all opened up with a harder difficulty for me to experience for the first time sounds amazing, and would revitalize a lot with this game for me and make me really interested in going through all of that, because I just can't bring myself to do it in the current state. And like I said, this is no knock on anyone else that prefers different kinds of play styles or anything. I enjoy a lot of that too. Like in Diablo 4, I go through and I just mash my buttons and I kill stuff, and it's fun. I definitely like that too. But I don't like that as much for like going through a story in a game and trying to immerse myself in a story. It just doesn't, I don't know. It just doesn't fit as well for me. So I hope there's options. I hope they don't force people that like the current difficulty into this. But I hope they give that option in a nice way for those that have been wanting it. All right. Next thing here is improving the overall feel of combat with animation, effects, and potential audio work. Yeah, I mean, I'd say this is one of ESO's weaknesses. I don't really mind it so much as a veteran player, but for new players, this is a lot more important, and this can really kind of make the game not feel as fun or as interesting or impactful, I guess, when you're in combat. Especially like with a lot of the animations not fully playing out, and it just, you know, when you're watching someone in combat, like say you're watching someone stream, a lot of setups that people use and engage in combat with, you can't really see what they're doing in combat. It's just kind of a jumbled mess unless you're like watching their skill bar and seeing what buttons they're pushing. And for me, I don't really care that much. Like, you know, a lot of times my eyes are like all around in the environment anyways, like, you know, making sure I'm watching for mechanics and watching my skill timers and stuff like that. So I'm usually not just watching my characters' animations and what they look like anyway, as a veteran player. But new players are. And I think some veteran players are as well. And it's really just a win-win overall here. Like, even for people that don't really care about it, it's still nice for it to look and feel better. But this is all pretty vague so far. So we'll have to see what actually comes of this. Because they have changed things in the past that were not very well received with animations, effects, and stuff. Like Templar's jabs, rapid strikes. They changed those up, and I don't have exact numbers, but I feel like more people disliked those changes than liked them. It could be that just people that didn't like it spoke up a lot more than people that did. That's always something to consider, because generally when people dislike something, they're way more vocal about it than people that like it. But I have a feeling more people disliked it than liked it with jabs and rapid strikes. So, I'm glad they're doing this, but it also really depends on what they do, right? But overall, so far, what I'm reading, I think, is spot on where they need to be focusing. Because they have a really unsturdy base that they just keep stacking chapter after chapter after chapter on top of. And it's like, at some point you have to shore up this foundation, or it's going to crumble. And so I think they're doing exactly what they need to do with this. Saying, hey, chapter format is going out the window. We're going to move on from that. We're going to focus just on making the game better and not put these deadlines on us to meet this June quota every year. We're just going to dig into the game and make it better. And I think that's exactly what they should be doing. Let's see. Experimenting with more zones like Craglorn, although not as large in area or scope, created exclusively for high-end group and soft group content with associated gear chase. This could be really cool too. Imagine. So right now we have dungeons, we have trials, we have IA. This could be like a new type of group content where there's like cool gear and collectibles to get. You need to get in a group for it, but it's more like a zone that you go through and accomplish these things in. So there's quests, I'm sure there'd be like world bosses and different stuff like that. And different little like quest delves and whatnot. I think that's cool. Obviously, Craglorn didn't, they changed Craglorn from this after it was released because it didn't really go over as well as they thought. It wasn't that well received. But, it's a different, this is a long time after Craglorn. So I think it's good to experiment more with it. Experimenting is what they're doing. And I think that is what they need to be doing. They're experimenting with Cyrodiil campaigns. What's up, Code? Variety is key. Yeah, it is. And not being predictable, which they've also addressed in this letter. Adding and refining tools to make guild recruitment, interaction, and management easier and more logical. More ideas here, and of course we are listening to you and we'll be coming up with new ideas based on your feedback. So, a new focus on change and experimentation. I think this is great. I think I'm happy to see they're moving away from the chapters. They're going to seasons, which seem to not have to launch at any specific time. They can just come out when they're ready. And then focus on change and experimentation within the game to really shore up what we already have there and work on what we have there instead of just adding on top of this base every year. So, I mean, I've been a bit critical through this, but I do like the direction that they're going, or that they are stating that they're going. Okay, so the next section is concentrating on new and returning user experience. It's long past time that we address ESO's new and returning user experience. This game is so large at this point that we need to refine the new user experience. Our goal is to shield new players from being overwhelmed by dozens of content options presented to them on entering the world, and instead give them the essential guidance they need to enjoy the game before opening it up to all possibilities. Additionally, we have millions of players who return to the game every year after taking months to years off. It's often confusing to them what they should be doing. We need to address this by making sure the game's map and other quest information UI areas clearly show the user where they were when they left, what has been added since then, and where they will find content they will love. Here are a few of the items planned to improve the new and returning user experience. Some of these will launch in 2025, some afterwards. A new patcher with improved visuals and performance for PC. Returning to the original Whaling Prison tutorial area for all new players. This has already launched, but we'll be regularly tweaking it to improve the experience. I think this was a good idea, to just put everyone back in the Whaling Prison. This was supposed to be the way the game started. This starts off the whole main quest line, the whole idea behind that. And so to have the main quest of ESO put off as this like optional thing that you may or may not even run into. I mean, you have the lady that comes in and is like, hey, I need you for whatever, and then drugs you or knocks you out or whatever it is, whatever they change that to. But I'm sure not everyone did that quest when the lady came up, or even realized like, hey, this is like the main story quest for the game. So putting that back in the tutorial, that's the right call, I think. Visually improving base game zones with updated textures and art assets, starting with the starter islands. These should be rolling out in March 2025. That's sooner than I thought. I think this is huge. I think this is so huge. They should do the Whaling Prison as well to start. I don't know if it's too late for that, but they should do the Whaling Prison tutorial area and the starter islands. Although the Whaling Prison looks pretty decent still, I think. Maybe they don't really need to update as much there. But this is huge. This has been asked for so many years now, because all of the newer zones just look so much better. But for most people starting the game, you know, they're not coming in and immediately... A lot of people are not coming in immediately getting ESO Plus, immediately going to all the DLC zones. Like, the base game is where most people are going to start.
Hi.
So having those zones actually look up to the quality of the newer zones, that's so big. That's so big. And March is right around the corner. We'll be seeing the starter islands updated. So that's awesome. I'm so glad they're doing this. So, I mean, that kind of goes in with what they're doing here, increasing the difficulty of the Overland, improving the feel of combat with the animation effects and audio work, and then also visually improving. They're just kind of, they're making that whole package more suitable for 2025, it sounds like. And it's, yeah, that's what they need to do, because that is where your new player starts out. That's what they see. They might not ever get to these new updated, prettier zones, you know? Or they might just be bored out of their minds with the difficulty. Who knows? Let's see here. Next is not showing new players prologue quests or chapter quests, compass pins. The jury is still out on how Stuka will feel about this. Okay. Yeah, that's probably fine. That's just probably overwhelming. Like, there's just too many options, too many things to engage with. Sprucing up the game's PC UI, which is long overdue for a modern visual upgrade. Yeah, that's yeah, they've never updated the UI, have they? Other than like additions for new systems. But as far as like the base UI, sounds like a lot of add-ons will be broken soon. Yeah, probably. But I think this is good. What I hope they do with this, though, is leave the default UI as an option. Like, so in your settings, I mean, they could even make the new updated UI the default, but have like default or classic options. So if you like that original classic look, you can use that. You don't have to use their new updated, because I guarantee no matter how awesome they make the new UI, doesn't matter, there's gonna be people that want to keep the original. 100%. There's gonna be people that want to keep the original UI, and they're gonna be pissed off because it's gone. Add on for classic UI. Yeah. So just keep an option there. Like, I can use the new default updated UI, or I can go to the classic UI and have a toggle in the settings. Other map and UI systems still in design idea stage to make returning to the game more seamless and get you back into the action quickly. Okay, I don't know what this means exactly, but I guess they're trying to figure out that still as well. Just, I guess, what you're seeing on your map and your UI when you hop back in to kind of give you some direction. More options is always better. Yeah, I agree. Tooltips to explain what it is, maybe. Yeah, and I'm seeing games do so well with their tooltips lately. Baldur's Gate 3, Path of Exile 2. Their tooltips are so good. You can actually like hold down a button, or I think Path of Exile you hold down Alt. Baldur's Gate you press T. And it freezes the tooltip on your screen, and then you can mouse over areas of the tooltip and it'll pull up other tooltips that you can read. You can freeze those on the screen and go in that and mouse over other areas within that. And so the tooltip can be really simple on the surface, but allow the player to really dig into that as much as they want and really have clarity and explanations for all the different things going on within it. That is the modern way of doing that. Like Baldur's Gate 3 nailed it. Path of Exile 2's is a little more clunky, but you can still really dig into the tooltips well. And I'd love to see something like that for ESO. Because the tooltips give you so little information that, like, they don't. One thing Path of Exile and Diablo does as well, they put tags on skills that very clearly let you know like what categories these skills are in. So even basic ones like AoE, direct damage, single target, dot, heal over time, stuff, tags like that just take away the guesswork in the tooltips. That'd be huge. But I really love the idea of like being able to dig into the tooltip and like, I don't know, I think BG3 and PoE2 are at the forefront of the industry when it comes to that kind of thing. Like that's where tooltips are going and need to be. You should be able to do that within the game. You shouldn't have to constantly be tabbing out and looking in another window, using your second monitor or whatever to look at every little thing to understand how it works. Like, you should be able to do that within the game.
Hi.
Hovering over a damage CP and telling you which skills you currently have slotted would buff would be cool. Yeah, stuff like that would be amazing. Or, just even on the skill, showing which CPs buff it. So, like, this is buffed by Biting Aura and Thaumaturge, That kind of stuff would be great. And I think they underestimate how many people would appreciate things like that. They're like, oh, our game's more casual. People don't really care about that stuff. But I think a lot of people do. I think it doesn't have to be like the base tooltip that you look at when you just highlight a skill. It doesn't have to be some like crazy, convoluted, jumbled mess of information. But right now it's just really lacking. So to be able to dig into that more would be huge. And I don't know if that's really, I don't think that's what they're addressing here, but that is another thing I think they should definitely look into. Color the skills tooltip to know the classification. That would be nice too. And then you'd start just associating that color with that damage type. Yeah, that could definitely work. All right, let's move on here. Continuing to tell great stories. With the changes to our content release model, please be assured that we are not abandoning new quest content, but we will do it in different ways than we previously have. As our focus will not be on adding giant new landmasses, although we will do that from time to time. Instead, we will use existing zones and areas to tell new stories. So this tells me we're not getting a new zone once a year. I don't know. I shouldn't say that. But them saying they're not adding giant new landmasses, although we will do that from time to time, makes me think they're not doing that. That's not going to be coming on a yearly interval, which I guess makes sense if they're not doing the chapters once a year in June. I think that's fine. I think some people will be disappointed by that. But for me, if they still add a trial, for instance, but like, let's say they added a mini trial that is in I don't know, Stormhaven, right? Like, that's cool. Like, I don't really mind it. Like, to me, it doesn't have to be in a new zone, stuff like that. You know, they already do that with dungeons. Like, sometimes dungeons are in new zones, but sometimes dungeons are in zones that we already have. Yeah, Maul was in Reaper's March. You'd like more info about abilities bosses use? Says they're unique. Yeah, and one thing with the trial, especially in trials, they do it some in dungeons too. The mechanics often just ignore what the player has learned to be as mechanics. Like, you build resistances to a certain type of damage, like physical and spell or whatever. Or, you have something that reduces damage to this, but it just doesn't work for some reason. And I've never really liked that about the trial design, that they just override our base mechanics as players in ESO. Yeah, the fact that Purge barely purges any effects, it doesn't feel good. It's like, we're new to the game, we're learning, we're building up, we're figuring things out, we're learning how the game works. Stuff like Purge. Now, obviously, I get why they remove Purge from certain things, but I feel like it's way overdone. It's just so way overdone. It should be an exception rather than the rule in trials. Instead, the exception is a mechanic that you can actually purge, right? And so this skill is like, oh, we'll run it in Halls of Fabrication, and that doesn't make sense. Like, this is a core mechanic of ESO, is purging negative effects. And you just pretty much disable it in trials. I think maybe there should be specific mechanics that you cannot purge, and those can really stand out and have some kind of like weight behind them, that this is a special non-purgeable mechanic. But for the most part, Purge should still work. Like, it's a part of the game. But yeah, that all kind of ties back into like the UI, the tooltips, the overall way that the player experiences the game and learns the game in a way that makes sense. It's all just like, it ends up just being all this tribal knowledge. Like, there's no rhyme or reason, and you just have to memorize everything instead of it being something that is set up in a logical way where, okay, this works this way. Yeah, maybe there's a small exception in these few places, but I learned how this works in the game, and this works this way in the game. Okay, so they said... Okay, so their focus will not be on adding giant new landmasses, although we will do that from time to time. Instead, they'll use existing zones and areas to tell new stories. Some of these are continuing the stories in existing zones and storylines and bringing back familiar characters. New stories focused on Hallmark Elder Scrolls organizations like Dark Brotherhood, Thieves Guild, Fighters Guild, Mages Guild, splitting a large zone across multiple updates. I don't really understand that one. Is that like northern, southern, elsewhere? Is that what they mean? Like, I don't know. I don't see how that bolsters continuing to tell great stories. But all right, we're embarking on these changes to give the development team the space to find a new cadence
It's a Wade. Oh my goodness.
Tamer Shadow with the raid, with the Wade. Hopefully I typed that right. I think I did.
Hi.
Get you a shout out there. Thank you very much for the raid. Hope your stream went well. We're going through the letter from Matt Fyro right now. Working through that, talking about it. I'm doing good. Thank you. Thank you again. Y'all make sure to go give Tamer a follow if you're not already. All right. So we are embarking on these changes to give the development team the space to find a new cadence that can mix new content and systems with addressing feedback, fixing issues, and adding new quests and activities to existing zones and stories. It will not be as regular as the old annual cadence, so expect season launches and new content systems and test announcements throughout the year, not necessarily in January as we have done since 2017. So the next big announcement event will be in April instead of January, and they'll announce the first season. There will be much more in the April announcement, but for that you'll have to wait. Still have content update in March 2025 on PTS as normal in January. And we'll give you more information about that sometime early in the new year. So looks like we're still getting the dungeon pack, but that will be the last of the old cadence, and then they're moving to this new thing. You've already heard the news that we will not be doing a 2025 North American community event as we originally planned. This was a difficult decision, but as shown by the planning and development changes listed here, we need to focus on the game itself for a while this year. That said, we will still see you at local community events in many territories, so stay tuned for announcements and details on those. I don't really see how that has to do with an NA big event. But I don't want to get into that, to be honest. We're not going to know, so. And finally, my thanks to you all. Thank you so much for being part of the wonderful community that makes up this amazing online virtual world. As I've said many times before, we would not be here without you. You all have navigated many changes throughout the years and have given us invaluable feedback. It's helped steer our direction making since our beta program 2013. Have a wonderful holiday and see you in Tamriel, Matt. I think this is one of his best letters overall as far as just like breaking down what's coming. Usually they don't do that. He usually just kind of goes over what we did in the year, how it went, maybe some very small tease. So it was nice to see like a bit more opening up about the direction that the game is going. I mean, it's pretty huge. Next year's going to be a lot different for the game and the years following, it seems. So I guess, you know, overall, I think they're doing some good stuff here. I think their plans are in the right areas. Highlights for me specifically are Overland difficulty, the animations, effects, and audio work,
Hi.
and the visual improvements to base game zones. Those are like the big things for me. I'm really glad they're going and revisiting these things. I think moving away from the yearly chapter thing is fine. It does seem like overall they're probably moving towards just less content updates. As far as big content updates, though, as someone that is not super into the new zones and stuff that much anyways, I don't know how much this will affect me. You know, like I said, if they're still adding new trials, new dungeons, but maybe the trial comes in like Stormhaven, like I said, I don't care. Like, that's cool. I don't really care where the trial is. It doesn't have to be in a brand new zone. If they're still adding in new systems, like they said they're going to experiment with new Craglorn like zones that are focused on group content, for high-end group and soft group content with associated gear chase. So I'm not sure, what is soft group content? Does that mean like you don't have to be grouped, but you're just there with other people? I think that's what that means. If they say soft group, like you're not technically grouped up, but you're not solo either. There's groups of people. World events, group delves. Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure there. But I like this idea. So I think if they're still adding new trials, they're still adding new dungeons, they're still adding new types of content for groups to engage with, they're still adding new stories, I think it's probably fine. But the pessimist in me just can't help but wonder if this is just a way for them to repackage and rebrand, them saying like, we're going to be releasing less content. It's not necessarily a bad thing though, if it's a little bit less content, if in doing so they're improving the base of the game, they're improving that structure that desperately needs to be improved and has been put on the back burner for so many years now. If that's the trade-off, I'm 100% fine with that. So, as with all of these letters, it's great to see what's going on in the dev side of things, but time will tell what actually happens. You know, like we need to seriously address Cyrodiil performance. Well, we'll see. We'll see. You know. But this is a lot more than I originally thought we would get in this dev letter. And I do think if they actually stick to what they're saying here and we get like 90%, 80% of this, I think it's a win. You know, but I can just see at the end of 2025, our Cyrodiil performance experiments didn't work out as planned, but we are still dedicated to addressing Cyrodiil performance, you know, and it's like year after year, we see that same thing. And so as much as I want to be optimistic and as much as I want to believe that it's going to happen, I just can't buy stuff like this until I see it anymore. There's been too many years in the past that I've bought into it, and then it doesn't happen. And I get hyped again the next year, and it doesn't happen. And then hyped again the next year, and it doesn't happen. And you know, you can only do that to yourself so many times before you just start saying, okay, these are just words now, until we actually see it. But I mean, this is a lot for them to dig into and overhaul, and I think they're at least what they are saying that they're focusing on. These are the right things they should be focusing on. Someone in chat also mentioned gear sets, and I think that's something they underestimate how important that is to people. And the state of gear in ESO is just, it's such a mess. It's such a mess right now, and it needs a complete overhaul and revitalization. But that's a topic for a different video. But yeah, this is really interesting stuff. I'm glad they went into a lot of details here. Thank you, Matt, for the letter. Thank you.